It's 3:30. Let's start on time. Can everyone hear me okay? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, hello and welcome. My name is Kelsey Visser, and on behalf of the Peace and Justice Institute at Valencia College, I want to welcome you to our three-part community resilience series with Dr. Ken Ginsburg. So he's back, and we're hoping to bring him back again in October or November, depending on his availability. So tonight is our second in the series for healthcare professionals addressing risk by building on strengths. So I just want to take a moment to really thank all the healthcare professionals here with us today for all that you're doing, all the service, putting others first. And I know that it's been a challenging time with COVID. So thank you so much for being here. And I want to really thank our partners, Orlando Health, our sponsor of the event, for generously sponsoring the event. And additionally, we want to thank everyone in the community, all the community members in the Creating a Resilient Community Network that are here with us today and really moving this work forward in the community. So we do have a message, a brief welcome message from our sponsor, Orlando Health, from Dr. Adebanjo. So I want to start with that.
Good afternoon. I would like to welcome you to the Addressing Risk by Building on Strength workshop today. I'm Dr. Tolu Adebanjo, a pediatrician and preventive medicine physician with Orlando Health, Arnold Palmer Hospital for Children here in Orlando, Florida. At Orlando Health, it is our mission to improve the health and quality of life of the individuals and communities that we serve. We do this by caring for and about our patients. Every day, our frontline team members provide quality, compassionate, and innovative care. As a pediatrician, much of my work focuses on early childhood development and education, and I have a personal interest in adverse childhood experiences. At Orlando Health, Arnold Palmer Hospital for Children, we've been serving our Central Florida children and families facing difficult medical and emotional challenges for over 30 years. During today's workshop, you will hear about tools and resources that we as healthcare professionals can use in our everyday practice to identify and address adverse childhood experiences. Strategies will be introduced that will aid you in delivering strength-focused, trauma-sensitive care to apply in your work with your children and youth. I know that you share our commitment in making our community a more resilient, trauma-informed one. I would love to hear from you and how we can better partner together, especially as we begin screening for ACEs in my clinic. Please feel free to reach out to me if you would like to connect or collaborate. Stay safe, stay healthy, and enjoy the workshop.
Thank you for that, Orlando Health. Just a couple technical reminders since we're all in this virtual space together. I do want to let you know that we are recording right now. So just a point of awareness, if you don't want to be seen or heard, you might want to mute yourself and also turn off your video, but we would love to see you. So I hope you do keep your video on. For the schedule, Dr. Ginsburg is going to be presenting until about 4:30, and then you'll have a half hour at the end for Q&A. So start thinking about questions as you're hearing him talk so that when it's time for the Q&A, you can actually pop your questions in the chat box, or you can raise your little hand, the blue icon, and we can unmute you. And so you can share your question personally with Dr. Ginsburg. Also, while he's presenting, you'll see you have some viewing options. So at the top, you might want to go to presenter, to speaker view, excuse me, so that you can see him on screen at the same time with the slides. And you'll see that you have a toggle option to make him bigger. And it's really important so you can actually engage and see him interacting. He's very active. He moves around. He's very expressive. So make his screen as big as the slides so you can enjoy that actual presenter feel instead of seeing him as a tiny little box in the corner. And if you need any help with that, you can just type a question about it in the chat box and we'll help you move through that. So right now you are muted just because we're trying to be able to hear Dr. Ginsburg, but toward the end of the Q&A, we will give you the opportunity to unmute yourself by just raising your little hand or typing your question in the chat box, and we'll hope to get to all of your questions. But we have a half an hour, so we might not get to them all, but start thinking about your questions now. And just a few ways to get involved. We have a Creating a Resilient Community Network that we would love for you to join. Right now it's 200 members, over 9 sectors are involved. And if you want to join that, we have a form that we're going to put in the chat box that you can click on that link. And any links that I share right now, I will send out as a follow-up email, so you don't have to worry about writing it all down right now. Our next meeting is on Tuesday, September 29th from 2 to 4 p.m. on Zoom. And our goal together is to be a network to collaborate across sectors and communities to transform our region into one of prevention, hope, healing, and resilience for all. And I know that you're a part of that. So we also are starting a community common read of Dr. Ginsburg's book, Building Resilience in Children and Teens. So we just started 3 weeks ago. It's not too late to join in. And we actually have our first live virtual session next week. So if you want to get the book, there's still time to order it and dive in. We'll have 2 more live sessions after that. So we really hope that you'll join that. There's a link to join the Facebook group and also a link to register for the live sessions. And I'll share that after. And then if you want to join ACEs Connection Central Florida, this is a great space to share resources, research, events going on related to ACEs and trauma healing, trauma-informed care. So I hope that you'll join this as well. ACEs Connection is a national space, but we have our own specific Central Florida page. So this is where you can actually, connect with others in the community about this work. So we hope you'll join that as well. I do want to give a proper introduction to Dr. Ginsburg in case you don't know him. He was our keynote speaker at our recent conference in April, and we brought him back to speak to parents, and now he's here with you, healthcare professionals. So Dr. Ginsburg is the author of the AAP book, Building Resilience in Children and Teens, 4th edition. He practices adolescent medicine at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and is a professor of pediatrics at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. He directs health services at Covenant House, Pennsylvania, where he serves Philadelphia's youth enduring homelessness, and is also founding director of the Center for Parent and Teen Communication. His AAP multimedia toolkit, Reaching Teens, Strength-Based Trauma-Sensitive Resilience-Building Communication Strategies Rooted in Positive Youth Development, prepares professionals to be the adults that young people deserve in their lives. The third and final workshop is our, in this free community resilience series with Dr. Ginsburg, is going to be focused on educators and parents, and we'll let you all know when that's coming up so you can share it with your networks. So after this training, we will have an opportunity to share a survey. You can share your feedback, and so I'll share that link after Dr. Ginsburg is finished. So thank you so much for being here, Dr. Ginsburg, and this is all yours.
It is a absolute pleasure to be here. I just am good. So let's get started. So just for you to know, I may have screwed up the teeniest bit, which is I don't think I've left half an hour for discussion, but I will leave at least 15 minutes for discussion. All right. So today we're talking as clinicians about how it is that we can incorporate these different models of working with youth so that we can know how to address the risk that we want to do to keep kids healthy, but by doing it not by telling kids what not to do, but instead by building on their strengths. So let's start by looking at this little boy. This little boy is the screensaver on my computer. You may have seen him as I was toggling. This boy is the way I start every task that I do. Like, melt into his face. Look at his joy. See who he is. And for me, it's a reminder of why we do what we do, to make it so that young people can become their best selves, so that every person has opportunity and is able to become who they are deserving of being. So this little boy is my inspiration. And he is on an Italian Navy ship because the refugee boat that he was on just sank or was sinking. So I don't know what it is that his family has endured in Northern Africa that decided to make them get on that boat that was not seaworthy. But I do know with certainty what happened in the last hour. In the last hour, there was screaming, there was terror, there were people who were cold and wet. And yet this boy looks okay. See, this picture isn't really about the boy at all. This picture is about the adults that surround the boy. This picture is the best picture I've ever seen of human resilience because it not only demonstrates it, but it tells you why people are okay. The children will be okay when the important adults in their lives are centered on them and there to protect them. And when the important adults in their lives will co-regulate with them. So not very good at math, but I see 3 adults there. And I'm assuming the 2 of them are going to be the parents, but it tells us that when parents are there, the rest of us are additive. And when they're not there, the rest of us are absolutely critical. 2020, what a year, right? I believe that we stand at an inflection point in human history, even before all of these crises began happening. Why? Because for the last 10 or 15 years, thanks, really, starting in the world of pediatrics, that we began really understanding what it is that drives health. You see, we have always known that bad things ran in communities. We've always known that if something bad happened to a grandmother, it was more likely to happen to the grandchild. And then we came up with the only explanation we could, which is that we determined that there was something wrong with the community or wrong with the family. And that is at the root of so many of the isms that have scourged humanity, right? Now, thanks to science, we understand why it is that bad things, poor health, run in communities. And we understand that it's about childhood trauma. And when the adults in those communities or in those families are so stressed, so oppressed, so marginalized, they lack the resources that they cannot fully develop the children or offer the children the nurturance and the nourishment that they deserve, children suffer. And their bodies, their brains, their behavior, and indeed the genetics they pass along to the next generation may suffer. And what that means is that by protecting the children, we can turn things around. How about 2020? We have the confluence of this science that's happening, and we have at least 3 concurrent crises. The question is whether things will ever be the same again. And my answer, quite definitively, is I hope not. I hope that this is an awakening. Because if we paid any attention at all, we understand that the most vulnerable people are there because of society's structures and systems, and that we can do something to make a change. We know that childhood trauma affects the body, the brain, behavior, even genetics. So the trauma-informed movement began 15 or so years ago, really in '98, but then it got wings later on. And the problem is that the trauma-informed movement humbly backfired in many ways. Why? Because it should make you more empathetic. It really should. It should change your lens, to draw from Sandy Bloom's work, from what's wrong with you to something happened to you, and that's good. But what it can also do is make you so empathetic that you choose to lower your expectations on someone. And if you lower your expectations on someone, then make no mistake about it, you become one more chain in the link of oppression. So what we need to do is draw from the best we know of trauma-sensitive, not informed practices, because I care what you do more than what you know. So the best of trauma-sensitive practices, with everything we know about positive youth development, which is lifting kids up by building on their strengths, because we understand that kids live up or down to the expectations we have of them, and resilience building strategies. Because as much as we wish we could wrap kids in downy quilts, it's not possible. What we can do is get them to be able to bounce from difficult circumstances. So we have to have a model that acknowledges people's pain, but that always sees the best in them. We have to see a model that certainly recognizes structural racism and undermining forces of low expectations, but that doesn't just apply a new label to already marginalized communities. For example, our communities of color do not need an extra label slapped on them of being traumatized. How about we look at them differently? How about we see their resilience, their strength, their ability to survive and to thrive and to lead us despite all that they have endured. This model is available through the American Academy of Pediatrics. So we are, your community, I'm thrilled to say, is doing a read of Building Resilience. And at the end of this, I'm going to introduce you to Reaching Teens for those of you who don't know it, which is an American Academy of Pediatrics, but absolutely not just for clinicians, health clinicians. In fact, I'll tell you a secret. It's too big for most health clinicians, but I'm going to teach you how to work with it. But the youth development world is going gangbusters over it, which is very exciting. And I will introduce it to you later. But what I'm talking about is all in there. At the root of all models, those 3 models, right? Positive youth development, resilience, trauma-sensitive practices, is the power and the primacy of human relationships, both to build strong, successful youth and to heal those who have endured hardships. See, what we seek is the sweet spot. This paragraph explains it all. And in this paragraph, you should hear the theories without the jargon. You should hear a call to restorative rather than punitive practices without the jargon. So we know that young people need safe, secure, and sustained relationships to thrive. We even know that such relationships can allow them to heal from hard past. But we have to guide them so they're accountable to being their best selves. And when we do so, they have to know that our high expectations are rooted in our caring. And ideally, our efforts at accountability must enhance rather than disrupt our protective relationships. Who are we, the healthcare clinicians? Let's be honest, we're not the people with the sustained relationships, right? Safe, yes. Secure, absolutely. Sustained, no. We can have a long-term relationship, but we do not necessarily deliver enough of a dose to make the huge difference in a person's life. What we can do is catch them without shame or stigma, refer them to someone who can deliver a more steady dose of positivity, including, most importantly, their parents, but also community members or mental or emotional health support systems. If we know what to do, if we know how to refer, all right, without shame or stigma. But what we absolutely are the people at an inflection point in a human life. People come to us and we can choose to build upon their strengths, make them believe in themselves, and get them to the next spot. See, healthcare clinicians, let's face it, we are the front lines of youth service, all right? We can be the first people to note a young person's distress if we know what to look for. But many youth, the ones who can find their words, we're not the first ones who know they're distressed because they're speaking to their parents or their teachers before they get to us. Then our role is as the gatekeepers, the gateway to emotional and behavioral services. But for so many young people who can't find their words, who don't know that what's happening to them sometimes is even abnormal, they instead present with their bodies, with headaches and fatigues and all sorts of somatic symptoms. We can catch them before they spiral downward if we know how to connect with them. And our role as change agents is solidified when we can refer to the next steps of care using strength-based language. By the end of today's talk, I'm going to give you tools that will teach you how to do some of this. I'm sure you're already great at it, but maybe build your skills or help you to teach others to do some of this. And it's really important that I know we have to stay in our own lanes. I know people get scared of me a little bit because they think that I'm trying to teach everybody to be a counselor. I'm not. I want doctors to do and nurses to do what we do best, which is doctoring and nursing, but to know how to get people to the next steps. Because what we do is powerful, even within our own lane. What's beautiful about what's happening in Orlando is that this movement is not just about healthcare clinicians. With the Peace and Justice Institute, Orlando Health is involved in many different aspects, many different settings and disciplines. This is how you build a community. People stay in their own lanes, but they know how to reach across the aisle, right? When we do that, we build a strength-based community. Resilience. It's about overcoming adversity, bouncing back. Certainly, it's about surviving difficult times, but it's more than that. It's also about thriving in the best of times. It's a mindset, right? This is a biologic issue that you can help people explain. And what I'm about to show you is how I explain somatization, how I begin discussions around stress. To understand resilience, you have to understand stress. To understand stress, you have to understand that we all come from the jungle. And this guy's great-great-great-grandpa, that's the worst thing that could happen to you, is that he could eat you. And if you don't believe me, think about what happens to your body, the extent to which we are designed to deal with stress. So here I am in my jungle chair, and I smell a tiger. What should I do? I should jump. Where do I need the blood? I need it in my butt, which is my jumping muscle, and my legs, which are my running muscles. Where does it come from? If you're wondering, what's the first feeling that a young person has or an adult has when they're stressed? Butterflies. Why? Because that is the blood leaving the belly to go to the butt so you can jump. How cool is that? And what do we know about our patients who have chronic belly pain? Their hormonal system is out of balance. They're always running from a tiger or ready to leap. What that means is that the blood is not in their belly, it's in their muscles. And we have to learn how to bring it back. That's the root of dealing with somatic belly pain. But what else happens? Your heart beats fast. Why? So you can pump that blood. You sweat so you can cool off. Your pupils get big so you can jump over the log, even if it's dark out. And you can't think clearly. You breathe fast. Why? To oxygenate that blood, blow off the carbon dioxide. And you can't think clearly. Why? Because you're not supposed to turn to the tiger and say, I'd like to work this out with you. And you can't feel fully. Why? Because you're not supposed to turn to the tiger and say, help me understand why it is you want to eat me. I just want to get it. If we understand the connection between the body and the mind, we are positioned as healers to help people access their calm selves, right? We are able to help them access their parasympathetic system, their chillin system. Because if we can turn on their chillin system, then the blood goes from the legs back to the belly. The blood actually will, and you will be able to think. The blood goes from the amygdala to the cerebral cortex, and you will be able to think and to problem solve and to connect. This is all science. And the trick, because we're not going to cover it later, but it's extensively covered in my writings, the trick is to flip the switch from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic system, because it all runs in a bundle, and the only thing you can control is how you breathe. So why does meditation work? Why does yoga work? Why does mindful work? Science. Because deep meditative breathing flips the switch to I'm chilling, which gets us our ability to think and our ability to feel back. But you know what? The tiger that we see is not actually the scariest thing. And the tiger that we see activates our adrenaline. It's the tigers we can't see that activate the more toxic, long-standing hormone in our lives. Look at this picture. There's a tiger there. This is how we are designed to be the sickest. The tiger could be there, could be there, could be anywhere. It's uncertainty. Uncertainty that creates a cortisol reaction, because you have to be ready to jump at any moment, in any time, in any direction. Uncertainty may be the greatest challenge to our sense of security. Let's look now from a scientific base. Remember, we are scientists. We can help people understand this stuff objectively. And racism. So many people say, why are we bringing this up? Racism is dropping. That's because they think racism is hatred. And they see racism only as a tiger about to attack you. That may or may not be dropping. We can argue that another day. What they don't understand is that when we are speaking of racism, we are talking about those things that are hiding in plain sight, that are the structural forces that really run our society, that make people not know. You know when this guy's coming. But with implicit biases, you don't know where you stand or how someone is thinking about you, and you have to be ready to jump at any moment and any time. And what we know about the trauma of science, the science of trauma, is that this is cortisol inducing, and this is what does tremendous harm to human beings. What can we do in order to have the greatest progress for those people who have had the hardest lives? So let's get back to what we know about science and the brain development. We know that brain pathways are formed starting in infancy. When you have something that happens repeatedly over and over again, then you don't have to think. And instead of having those like bare connections between neurons, you lay down brain pathways. That's what development is, right? You lay down a brain pathway to make something easier. Well, when you were born and you make a noise and you go, "Ugh," and your mother understands that you are hungry and takes out a breast, and that happens over and over again, you learn that life is secure, predictable. But when your mother doesn't know that you need nourishment and nurturance, then what do you learn to do? You learn to scream. And if that happens over and over again, then what happens is you learn to first to cry and then to scream for attention, depending on how you needed to raise it. And if you learn that it doesn't matter how much you cry or how long you scream, then you begin self-stimulating. And you learn and have brain pathways that say, I'm on my own. So how do we change someone's lives? We understand the power of the adolescent period. Adolescence is a time of astounding brain plasticity, where we can literally change people's brains and expectations by giving them the opposite of what they have had in the past. If their brain pathway says, I cannot trust a human being, and we are trustworthy, and we give them everything without asking anything in response, we change an adolescent. When an adolescent has learned that their emotions are denigrated, devalued, or ignored, we elevate, celebrate, bring them out, help them to learn to express their emotions, to process them, and therefore release them. And then they change. When a kid has no experience that adults actually are about safety and about protecting them, we go out of our way in our offices and at our institutions and our hospitals to make them understand how much we care about safety. You see, this strength-based communication stuff I'm talking about, don't misinterpret it. This is not a pat on the back. This is not an attaboy. An attaboy does not change a life. It's the repeated, over and over again response from the adults who are seeing you. That's why your community needs to work together to create the structures where kids walk down and navigate the streets and has a dose of positivity, not just in your offices. Brain development. I'm going to whip through this both to create some time for questions and because you guys are healthcare people, so you know this. What I want you to hear is the different language, because let me tell you something, the brain science around adolescence in the last 20 years has backfired. All engine, no brakes, holes in your head, deeply offensive stuff. But what I want to get to when I talk about brain development is so that you understand how to talk to parents and even in your offices so that kids can actually process emotions, process thoughts, and make decisions at the same level as adults. It's all about how we address it. So we know that the gray matter is the nerve cells. The white matter is the myelin, the connections between the nerve cells that form those neural pathways. That's what development is. New neural pathways getting laid down. When you're born, you got connections between your nerve cells, but they're gravelly roads. The signals get there, but they're bumpy and inefficient. But then you lay down superhighways. Where do you lay down the superhighways that are the pathways? Between the towns. You don't randomly lay it down, you put it down between the towns. What determines where the towns are going to be built? Well, reward centers are filled with dopamine, and the reward centers help you want to do something. So adolescents, for example, love being with their peers. They have reward centers that when they're with their peers, they go, right? Because those reward centers are filled with dopamine. This can be maddening, or it's a way of understanding that this is how you ultimately get grandchildren, right? So it can be a good thing as well. And these two things make it so to understand the superhighways get built between the towns, the reward centers encourage the towns to get built in certain places, and experiences, this is key to understanding trauma, for better or worse, also lay down the towns, right? So if you've been traumatized, you have a town that says, do not trust, remain hypervigilant, be reactive, it is a matter of saving your life. I had a kid last Friday who said to me, it's not that I ever had an anger problem, it's just when you've had enough of your bones broken, you learn to break bones before they come for you, right? He had a town that was built to enable him to survive. So the prefrontal cortex, remember that's the part of the brain that helps you with cognition, thinking, reasoning, planning, decision-making, and it modulates your emotions. Your amygdala is that part of your brain that's critical to emotional responses. Adolescence is a time of incredible plasticity, and that is done because you're both building pathways and getting rid of those inefficient things, pruning them away where you no longer need them. It's a time of astoundingly rapid brain growth where brains remain plastic. Everybody knows that the emotional centers develop first. The reward systems are very powerful. They determine where brain pathways will develop. Efficiency is developing because pruning is also happening. But what has happened is that the brain people sometimes make people think that adolescence is just this void instead of this developmental process where you're always developing. And in fact, it's very important for me to me for you to know is that reasoning ability always exists, but it's solidifying. I'll tell you how not to see it, this Allstate ad. Why do most 6-year-olds drive like they're missing a part of their brain? Because they are offensive. What's the right way to see it? We've got to nurture this brain. This is the operating system for life. But a brain exists within a person, who exists within a family, who exists within a community, who exists within a nation. We have to enrich and protect the brain and individuals. Adolescents are super learners. There will never be a time where they will again learn as much and as quickly and hold it and store it in memory as they will during adolescence. They're developing their social selves. Here's the thing, guys. Experimentation is a necessity, right? It's our job to create enriching, exciting, safe opportunities for growth while protecting from harm. This is where our role as doctors is to empower parents to know this stuff. I'm going to give you all the materials you need, most of which are free, for you to be able to click this information to your patients when you see them. All right? So, super learners have to push the edges. This is the puzzle of who am I? What do kids do? Their job is to push to the limits, right? That's how you learn. That's where new knowledge is. It is our job to create boundaries at those edges beyond which you can't stray, and to create golden opportunities at those edges. In other words, if we make school thrilling, going out on a date thrilling, going out for a school play thrilling, reading a book thrilling, then kids will push and stop. When adults do not have boundaries and do not create the thrills for kids, then kids keep pushing. In other words, risk is a problem of adults abdicating their role, because adolescents are natural experimenters. When we play our role, risk largely melts away. How do you talk to a kid? You have to understand the difference between hot and cold communication. See, kids' amygdala is brilliant. The emotional centers of their brain are going a little bit faster than the other part of their brain. They are brilliant. The kids with the most brilliant amygdalas are the kids who have had the hardest lives. The kids who have had the hardest lives have learned to always be vigilant and to always seek danger. So when we are hot communicators, meaning we are talking to their amygdala, either because we are angry, because we're condescending, because we're shaming, or because we list all the ways they can get hurt, right? Or we lecture them, all of this, or we talk to them in a way they can't understand, all of which I will be discussing in a few minutes. When we do that kind of hot communication with anger, condescension, poor communication, you're talking to a kid's amygdala, and when a kid's amygdala is stimulated, their brains can't catch up. But when we are calm, respectful, we don't give them lists, we let them catch up. We let them figure out things on their own. We are deeply respectful. That is called cold communication. When you do that, the brilliant amygdala senses that you're safe and it doesn't fire. And then the cerebral cortex can engage fully in decision making. And by the time you're a mid-adolescent, at the same level as an adult. So once again, it's about how we approach them. More on resilience. The bottom line of resilience is that young people are going to be resilient when the important adults believe in them unconditionally. That's not Johnny, it's okay to do drugs. That's Johnny, I'm not going anywhere. And hold them to high expectations. And that's about seeing the best in kids. Not only do parents have that role, but you have that role, and we're getting there. Resilience is not invulnerability, right? For your kids who are more depressed or more anxious, like I was when I was 17, when I was deeply depressed, I needed an adult to look at me and say that the part that was causing so much pain for me in the moment were actually my greatest attributes, which were the breadth and depth of my emotions. Above all, resilience is about human connection. When human connections, when we understand that alone, we are like a stick that can bend or break, but that together we are stronger than the sum of our collective strengths or of our individual strengths. When we make kids understand that, which is what I'm working on right now because that's the lesson of this time, then we will have a generation that will be resilient. When does resilience reach its limits? This is incredibly important for you in the health sector to make people understand, particularly school systems. Because what happens is you could kind of say the resilience reaching its limits is really about depression, right? And when kids look like adults who are depressed, everybody knows it, right? Everybody knows it. So when they smell, when they are not bathing, when they're sleeping too much, gaining weight, losing weight, we catch them. Indeed, when they're sad, we catch them. When we miss them is the other 50% of adolescents who express depression with rage. They're not sad, they're irritable. This thing right here, this is the school to prison pipeline, guys. It's those kids who have had really hard lives, who are expressing their anger, their frustration, and their rage, but they're really depressed, and they are seen as bad instead of sad. So we separate them rather than heal them. You are the healers in this collaborative. You need to be speaking really clearly this truth. Let's talk about trauma-sensitive practices very quickly. I'm so pleased that you have an expert like Dr. Adebanjo there to really be focused on this work, right? But let's talk about it ever so briefly. You've got to present it when you're out there speaking in the community in a way that people understand that does not re-traumatize them. People do not understand doctor talk. So when we say you're more likely to get cancer, 5 times more likely, from an epidemiologic point of view, relative risk, that's a huge finding. You need to know that people hear you're going to get cancer. They don't know that if there was a 2% prevalence, they now have a 10% likelihood. So when you speak the language of relative risk, you need to know that and when we talk about epigenetics, because we think it's interesting, what people hear is the worst thing that ever happened to me became me, predicts my future, and predicts the future of my grandchildren. We've got to be wiser about this. We've got to let people understand the relative risk means you're a little bit more likely to have something to happen, which is why you have to also understand that you are deserving of focused attention because we also have protective forces in your life. If you're more likely to get cancer, don't smoke. You're now better off than if you didn't even have this knowledge, if you choose not to smoke. Another thing is you got to be really clear when you're teaching people about this, that they understand that this doesn't go in both directions. Otherwise, you create a lot of shame and stigma. For example, for sure, you're more likely to become obese when you've been traumatized or to get lupus. But what we don't want is people in a room or looking at a family, and this happens all the time. You know, Aunt Connie, she's obese. I wonder if she was neglected. You gotta let people know it doesn't go in both directions. Most importantly, we have to let people know that trauma does not break you, and that in many ways it builds some of the best people on the planet, which I'm going to get to when I'm talking more about strength-based communication. That is not to say that I would hold as a prescription trauma. I wish the world had positive developmental trajectories for every single young person, but it doesn't. But if my car broke down, I want one of my Covenant House kids driving by because they're stopping. So this is the original study that you're probably familiar with. It's from San Diego County, 18,000 folks, and they did all the things we always do in medical studies, right? So tell me, do you have heart disease? Do you have strokes, cancer, lupus, all of diabetes, obesity, all those questions. Then they went further and they asked, tell me about your behavior. Do you use drugs? Do you protect yourself when you have sex? Have you been incarcerated? Have you had mental health issues? But then they went a step further, which is what happened to you in your household. And for each of these things, they gave you a score of 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4 or above. Let me tell you something, guys. Kids I work with at Covenant House, you have a Covenant House in Orlando, you know that, right? The kids I work with, I've never met a 4. On this scale, kids are 5, 6, well, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10s. And then when we add the community-based or environmental ACEs, this was done by Roy Wade, pediatrician, my mentee in Philadelphia, right? We add racism and exposure to violence, bullying, poverty. And now we have got 15 or so ACEs. And what do we know? We know that in a graded way, in other words, the more that you're exposed to, the worse you're going to have the changes in your body, the changes in your brain, to your behavior, and even to your genetics. But that's not why I'm here. Seriously, I'm one of the people who's talking about trauma all over the world, but I entered it from the point of view of resilience. I am here because of this slide. I want you to know, and this is what Dr. Adebanjo is talking about, a clinic that is going to focus on this. What's the intervention? The intervention is about strengthening the adults that surround the child. That's the intervention, right? Or a major part of the intervention. What do we know? There is a great body of research, and if you want to go to it or get a summary of it, it's really, there's a lot of people, but the best one-stop shopping is the Center in the Developing Child by Dr. Jack Shonkoff and colleagues. What do we know? We know that bad things happen to you unless you've had an adult who stands beside you. And if you do have an adult who's standing beside you, you end up looking like everyone else. I'm going to give you the science, and then I'm going to give you the Ginsburg theory. Ginsburg theory is defined as, makes sense to me, but I can't prove it yet. All right? So the science, what's happening? When I am exposed to trauma, I need to be able to run or jump at any moment. That makes my cortisol rise. Why? Because I need my blood pressure to be high. I need my brain to be hypervigilant, and cortisol is the mediator. Once you understand what cortisol does to your body, it's going to make you eat more salts, drink more water, eat more foods. Now you understand obesity, and you understand diabetes, heart disease, strokes. And what else do you guys give cortisol for? Inflammation. Got a rash, take some cortisol. Well, if you've been bathed in cortisol throughout your childhood, then what happens is your immune system will either get down-regulated, making you more likely to get cancers, or dysregulated, making you more likely to get lupus. We get that. We also have the science that says adults are protective. Here's the Ginsburg theory. When my grandma says to me, Ken, if your daddy comes home drunk, you're sleeping with me tonight. When my grandma says to me, Ken, there's danger on the streets tonight, you tell the boys you're taking care of your grandma. Then I borrow her hypervigilance, I borrow her cortisol, and therefore I do not need to mount my own. And that is the power of love. But what else do we know about those grandmas? We know that they die too soon. Covenant House is filled with people say, my grandma was my heart, but she died, but she was old, Dr. Ken. Yeah, how old? 52. Which means, and we've talked about this at the Peace and Justice Institute extensively, it means that when you are coming up with a community-wide trauma intervention, you don't just protect the children, you protect the adults who protect the children. Otherwise, we're just having tragedy. And you guys want to become more trauma sensitive? Here's the reality. It's going to hurt. It's going to take time sometimes. But you're going to be exposed to pain that most people choose not to see. And in truth, respectfully, that most doctors choose not to see. So what does it do to your brain and to your behavior? The first thing it does to your behavior is your amygdala is on fire, your cerebral cortex is a little bit less developed. People who have been traumatized are more likely, not absolute, more likely to not trust you, which is really hard for me. I don't expect you to know this, but I did like 12 years of research on developing trust in an office with kids. And so it's really hard for me when you don't trust me. And another thing is these kids are more likely to be reactive. Really hard for me because I'm such a calm guy. I really value calm. Also more likely to lie to you. Why is that? Because these kids grew up in a house where if their daddy came home and said, hey, who took the last hot dog? And you say, I did, daddy, then they throw you against the wall. It's only a matter of time before you stop seeing hot dogs. They're also more likely to confabulate or dissociate from reality. Why? Because if bad things were happening to you, you might remember as a child, you might remember the Super Bowl stain on the wall or the water stain on the ceiling. But the most protective thing for you is that you didn't remember what was happening to you and you learned to go to Disneyland. But it's hard for me, right? Because I'm a doctor. You're doctors and nurses and PAs, and you got to take a history. And if people are going to be not telling you the truth, not disclosing, dissociating, or going around confabulating. It's just so hard to know what to do. And another thing is, I like to be loved. I think we all do. And the kids who I like to connect with the most, sometimes it's really hard to connect with them. And that's hard for me. So it's really hard to work with people who have had hard lives if you believe it's about you. Trauma-sensitive practices begin with us knowing what is about us and what is not about us, right? And by that, I am not talking about building a barrier between us and our patients. I'm talking about the opposite. I'm saying when daggers are coming flying at you, but you know that they're about their pain, then you can hold their pain instead of internalizing what is coming towards you. Next, this is most important to me that you get. Trauma does not break kids, nor does it cause brain damage. We need to throw out some of the diagnoses that are given to these kids. These kids are coming to you. I'm gonna ask you to close your eyes. If you're in a setting by yourself and you feel safe, close your eyes. And I want you to listen to these descriptions and think about how you react. This is Luis, who is anxious, and this is Sarah, who's depressed. This is Billy, who has ADHD. This is Terry, who has been had a hard life and been traumatized. This is Scott, who is oppositional defiant disorder. This is Lucretia, who has an anger problem. This is Bobby, who has intermittent explosive disorder. This is Cecilia, who has conduct disorder, oppositional defiant. Open your eyes. The reactive behavior that kids display can give you any one of those diagnoses, any one of them. And it depends on who sees you. And it's flavored by what resources are available and which diagnosis is more likely to get you the resources, but also people's biases. We know for a fact that if you are a person of color, you are more likely to get oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder, intermittent explosive disorder. When someone's depressed, you want to embrace them. When someone's anxious, you want to calm them. When someone's ADHD, you want to build their skills. When someone has an anger problem, they've got the problem. When they are oppositional, when they have conduct disorder, you need to protect society from them. These labels are poison. And we in medicine need to throw them away and begin using the trauma-focused labels. Because when you use the trauma-focused labels, you want to heal rather than denigrate, castigate, or set aside. So the most important conversation that I have with kids is having them lose the labels that they've received. And the conversation goes something like this. Doc, I have an anger problem. I'll bet you've earned it, huh? Let me ask you a question. Do you see danger before other people do? Always. And then kids will tell you they have ESP, they have intuition, they can look across the room and look at someone's eyebrows and know when they're going to go off. Yeah, do you have a little brother or sister? One of each. Do you watch out for them? Always, because what happened to me isn't going to happen to them. Good friends? Not really. Mostly associates. The people you'd call friends, I call them family. Yeah, you watch out for them? Yeah, they watch out for me too. So if something's coming to your family or to your friends or to you, do you do what it takes to prevent the problem? Absolutely. Well, you know what, man? You have a protector's brain, and you've earned it. And if I was on a desert island, I'd want you to be standing by my side because you're going to see danger that I might miss, and you're going to care about me and take care of us both. It is your superpower, man. It is your superpower. Your challenge is you might see danger that's not really there, and you have to figure out when to keep your cape tucked in. I wonder if we can work together where I can send you to someone who can really help support you to learn when to bring out your superpowers of compassion, of caring, of protection, and when to know that you're actually safe. And then I'll give kids one more label, which is whatever their name is. Can I give you one more, Kelsey? It's Kelsey, nothing more and nothing left. This makes kids weep. This is about seeing them as they deserve to be seen. What are we going to do? we're going to offer radical calmness amidst a chaotic reality as best we can. Radical calmness, I don't mean being a robot. Be emotional, but be regulated, right? Because kids are going to draw from our ability to co-regulate. That's about borrowing your emotions. It's the way, it's amygdala to amygdala communication. It's the way to de-escalate, and it's the way to anticipate when things are rising. When you remain calm, you'll sense things at a lower level than if you're up and down, because you may miss a rising tide. It's also the key to allowing Mother Teresa to surface. I had an 18-year-old boy who I asked him to describe himself to me, and he said, I like to think of myself as Mother Teresa, well, you know, with an anger problem. And the best way to get Mother Teresa to surface is to co-regulate with kids. When we co-regulate, they can begin to develop their self-regulation skills. What do we look like? If you got a 5-year-old, you want to look like the duck gliding on the water. If you've got a teenager, you want to look like this guy. You're on the water still, but it's only because your feet are paddling really hard. And we want to show people how hard we work to be self-regulated. Remember before when I described myself as calm as part of like one of my values? So I need you to know something about me. I'm totally faking it, right? My little feet are paddling like crazy with self-talk to stay calm. What are the key principles of trauma-sensitive practices? This is the Reaching Teens model. First, knowing what's about you and what's not about you so that you can hold someone's pain. Changing your lens from what's wrong with you to something happened to you. Not your words, your lens. Seeing people as they deserve to be seen, not based on labels they've received or behaviors they've displayed, and giving control back to people from whom control has been taken away. I want you to know that the way we do medicine can restore or undermine control. If you do not thoroughly explain to someone why you are worthy of trust, and you just begin asking intimate questions, as we all must, then people feel violated. You got to talk about why you're going to be a place that they can talk about their feelings and their experiences without judgment. They've got to understand privacy and why we hold it so dear. It's not because it's the law, it's to create a safe zone where people can, without judgment, talk about what is really going on in their lives. And then when we talk about the limits of privacy, we should not say, unless you're going to hurt yourself, hurt someone, or hurt someone else, or someone's hurting you. My research says that kids know exactly what that means, and they don't get it, right? So if you were 15 and I said that to you, do you think I think cigarettes hurt you? Do you think I think skipping school hurts you? As a result, kids do not talk to us about what's going on. We need to be explicit. The information we talk about, we kept private, unless I was so worried about you that I thought your life was in danger. Or you are about to kill or hurt someone very badly, or there was an adult abusing you in any way. Everything else we talk about, we can keep in this room. But the best work I do is to support you to get the help that you deserve. So don't be mad at me if I say, hey, let's get other people involved. So that is a whole chapter in Reaching Teens that will give you films and everything else on how to do this well. And another thing, we're going to give you a psychosocial screen that begins with all that is good and right about the kid, which is the shades screen. So let's tie it together very briefly in 15 or 20 minutes before we get to questions. We want to develop strengths, address risk while acknowledging trauma. The first thing we have to do is have someone's back. That's what kids want more than anything else. What I'm about to teach you is going to make the difference about whether you're going to be in kids' lives only when they've got good news, or whether you're going to be someone they come to regardless. See, behavioral change is a process, not an event. There's forward movement, there's backward movement, there's forward movement, and there's backward movement. And what we tend to do is we think that being strength-based is being a cheerleader. Look at you, you got straight A's, I'm so proud of you. Well, if you do that, then what will happen is the next semester, when that kid gets A's, you're the first in line after the family. Next semester, straight A's, maybe 1 B, you're gonna know. But when that kid's father dies or goes to prison, you'll never know, because they don't want to disappoint you. Because your cheerleading was based on what they accomplished or what they did rather than the relationship. Learn in your offices to be thrilled when people talk to you. So if someone says, Dr. Ken, I got straight A's. Thank you for always telling me what's going on in your life. That makes me so proud. That simple change will make a difference. Next, when we're talking about behavioral change, we have to remember that confidence gets progress started and that shame and demoralization prevent action. We have to remember what our goal is. So when I was starting in adolescent medicine, which is like 30-something years ago, we were all about chlamydia and gonorrhea prevention. Well, you know what? Nobody is inspired by messages to not get chlamydia, right? Not inspiring. Our goal is to know all that is good and right in the kid so that they will be fully prepared to lead us into the future. Why do we not want to get chlamydia? Because it can get in the way of you becoming your best self for the following reasons. So we want to build kids' confidence by finding and building on their competencies. This is the field of a kid's life. This kid smoking marijuana, devastating to his brain development at 16. This kid selling drugs, devastating to his health and safety and community. This girl wants to become pregnant and she's only 15 years old. What is the typical traditional medical model? We look at the kid, we give them 4 to 5 reasons to let them know why they should change and what the problem is, and we're done. So we look at that young man and we say, young man, marijuana will fry your brain, make you grow breasts and shrink your balls. All of which is true-ish. But how does he respond? Thanks, doc. Why? Because why was he smoking in the first place? And the answer is that he was stressed. He was trying to turn down his emotions. And you're telling him that his balls were going to shrink? Just doesn't help him with his stress. It moves him in the negative direction. What do you want to do? Listen for all that is good and right in the kid. Listen for behaviorally operational strengths. So no vapid praise. Don't talk about the sports teams. I mean, you can if you want, but you're listening for what is really good about the kid. The insight beyond his years, compassion beyond measure, resilience in a life that would have destroyed you. Listen for what is good and right. Let yourself fall in love. And then you point out all that is good and right in the way I'm going to talk about in a minute, and trust that that is going to overtake the risk. Trust me, those of us who are strength-based, we see the problems. We just know that addressing them directly is not empowering to the human being. What is love? Love is seeing someone as they deserve to be seen, as they really are, not through the lens of the behaviors they sometimes need to display, nor the labels they may have received. This is what human beings need in their life. Loving is not the same as liking, right? You don't have to like a kid. You definitely don't have to like their behavior. Love is an active and intense listening process. And I also want to be clear, I don't use the word love with kids because it can be misconstrued. I'm talking about what we feel as human beings and how we convey it. Here is counseling 101. Listen to the kid. I don't say these words. I don't touch my body. I'm just trying to imprint in you counseling 101 to get kids to the next step. Let yourself listen, get on this side. Let the kid know why you're on his team. Listen to your viscera. It's when your heart goes, right? It's not a coincidence that a heart is the symbol of love. Heart, I care. But what part of your body tells you when you're worried? Your belly. For all the reasons I explained earlier. Your head, I plan. Hands, I accompany you in your journey. So let's look at that same young man who's smoking marijuana, right? You ask him why he smokes. He's going to tell you it's about how stressed he is and it helps him to chill. You go, man, you know, a man like you who has so many thoughts and feelings, you're going to be, it's hard sometimes when you're a kid, and I'm not going to lie to you about that. But a man with this much feeling, you're going to be the best father, the best lover, the best boss, the best colleague. You've got it. But it hurts. But I'm worried about you too. I'm worried because you're smoking weed to deal with those feelings. Do you know anybody who smokes 24/7? Yeah, what are they like? Chilling? How much do they get done? God forbid you would be like that. God forbid you, a man who is blessed with so many thoughts and feelings, would shut yourself down and not accomplish what you're capable of doing. I'm wondering if we can work together to get a plan for you so that you can still have all your thoughts and feelings, but not shut down your path to success. I'd like to get you to talk to someone who will really understand and see all that is good and right in you. And I'd like to help you get there. Heart, I care. Belly, I worry. Head, I plan. Hands, I accompany you in at least the next step of your journey. What else do we need to do? We need to have these relationships be sustained. So that is why we are listening to the behaviorally operational strengths. This is not about us. This is about us seeing the strengths the kid already possessed. So they walk out of your office with their own ruby slippers, and you have just helped elucidate them for them. That also reduces shame and stigma. And when that kid turns to you and says, Dr. Ken, you're the best doctor ever. So inside you can do a happy dance if you want, but you got to give it back to the kid. Because if he walks away thinking you're the best doctor ever, then you have to know that what is happening is that he is not going to trust anybody else. For his sake, give it back to him. Man, it's not about me. I just saw you because you chose to show me you. Do this for the next person, because the next person is also going to see you, see all that is good and right. And that is how to get them to the next step. Let's briefly talk about giving kids control over their decisions, right? So we have to talk to kids in a way that doesn't undermine their competence. No lectures, no hot communication, and we have to understand that children think concretely, exactly as they see things. They don't understand nuance. They can't plan for the future. Adults can plan for the future. They can think abstractly. They can understand nuance, unless they're stressed or unless they're not very intelligent. Adolescence is the process of change. So how do you learn during adolescence? You have life experiences. A guy says to a 15-year-old girl, I love you. She doesn't say, I question the veracity of that statement. She says, I love you too. They make love and he's gone the next day. And she learns and goes from here to here. We don't want our kids to be hurt. So what do we as parents, and sometimes even as healers, what do? We lecture kids. Don't you know that what you're doing right now, which I'm going to call behavior A, could easily lead to consequence B? I never imagined my little boy doing consequence B. Now I wonder what's between ears besides cobwebs. If consequence B happens, you're more than likely to go on a consequence C, which is a slippery slope down to consequence D, which is more than likely to go, look at me, young lady, when I'm talking to you. If consequence E happens, you're more than likely to go to consequence F, G, or H. And if H happens, many people will lead to I. And do you know what happens with consequence I? You might die. And what does the kid hear? First of all, you're talking to their amygdala, so they're not able to plan. They're not able to hear a lot. They also, the mathematical cadence is algebra. A goes to B, which goes to C. There are several different variables that make a difference to your ultimate outcome. And what kids hear is womp, 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 die. And they do not absorb any of your messaging. Instead, we are going to help kids figure things out calmly on their own in a simple mathematical cadence. Here is behavior A. What are you thinking might happen next to behavior B? And we deliver it in a style that they can absorb it. Simple math. You might know the whole outcome. Don't give it all to the kid. Give them one step that they can absorb at a time so that they get it, got it, own it. The book your community is reading right now has a lot of pages on how to do this, and Reaching Teens really does. Many examples. I'm going to give you one. People either believe that the world happens to them or they control their destiny. This is a 14-year-old girl, and this 14-year-old girl is in a girl gang. They're run by her 16-year-old cousin who has shot and killed 2 people. She wants to quit the gang, but she doesn't know how. She wants to be an architect when she grows up, so that she can build buildings for poor kids to keep them off the streets. But she doesn't know how to quit the gang. she came to me for a 9th grade physical, had no idea who I was. And at this point in my career, this is a long time ago, my main issue was youth violence. I said everything I knew how to say. I tried 4 or 5 ideas. Each one I gave to her, she said, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about, over and over again, until I got fed up. And I said, excuse me, I'm actually an internationally respected expert on youth violence. Joke. If a kid says you don't know what you're talking about, turn it back to the kid. Here's what I know. Here you are today. You're running with gangs. There's 2 possible futures for you. One is you're being an architect, building your community. Another, it's death and bringing other people down. I've said everything I know. Here's what I know also though. There are roads in both directions. And along those roads, there are several steps. And if you look too far in advance, sometimes you can get really overwhelmed and just give up. But if you just look at the one step in front of you, sometimes it's less overwhelming. Tell me, what do you have to do to die? She said, that's easy. I just have to keep doing exactly what I'm doing. All right. What's the first step? Don't look at being an architect. Just know that that's far ahead. What's the first thing you can do? And she thought about it and couldn't come up with anything and said, I guess I'm going to die. I do my work on that don't make the bed dirty paper, and I ripped it off, and she's like, what are you doing? And I said, I'm cleaning up. She said, that's not trash. That's my map to a positive future. I said, will you come back next week? And she did. And many don't, but she did. And she unfurled the paper and she said, these are all direct quotes. Dr. Ken, I failed you. What do you mean? I took this out every day and I tried to come up with some way of getting there, and I'm not going to be able to. I'm going to die. What would you say now? If you have an idea about getting out of the gang, it's not going to work. I tried it all the week before. This has to be about her. It has to be personally empowering. So what I said to her is, you came back to hear a little man talk at you, and you don't think you're on the positive road. And at that moment, she achieved locus of control because she understood she could make a decision in a simple way. And then she was released and she came up with the best ideas. We ended up getting her mother involved. Her mother is a good woman. Her mother is a woman who had no idea her daughter was in gangs. She was working 3 jobs to make it so that her daughter could go to graduate school. But you know who else loved her daughter? Her mother, her cousin. So she spent more time with her mother than the cousin let her break from the gang. While the mother got a new apartment, which was moving about 1.25 miles from West Philly to Southwest Philly, and this girl made it to college. Last big chunk, stress management. See, at its core, learning to cope in a positive way with life's inevitable stressors is the definition of resilience. And we might do our greatest good by equipping youth with a wide range of coping strategies. This is about how they can control their lives. Stress is incredibly uncomfortable. It makes you sweat, it makes you smell, it makes you not be able to think clearly. It's so stressful, you got to do something about it. Well, you know what? These negative coping strategies, don't read that as they don't work. In fact, they work best. Everything you don't want kids to do is about kids making choices to deal with pain in unhealthy ways. Whether it's cutting or eating disorders, sex out of context of relationships, drugs, bullying, it all feels good. The reason it's negative is because it only makes your life worse. Our challenge as healers and as adults and as parents is to raise kids with a wide repertoire of positive coping strategies so that the path of least resistance is there. But remember, the worst thing is not to be stressed, it's to become numb. What happens to people? They get exposed to it. This is whether it's a kid or whether it's us. This is how at Penn Medicine for about 23 years, this was the first concept that you were exposed to on orientation. You get exposed to so much pain and you want to deal with it. You really do. And you wish you could process all of your thoughts and feelings in real time, but you can't because you've got too much to do and things are coming too rapidly. So what happens? We put a container around our thoughts and feelings and we say, I'll deal with it later. I will. We do it and kids do it. but things keep coming too fast to manage. And the only way that you can maintain that sanity is if, in fact, we build thicker walls. Until those walls are no longer a safe container, they become leaden walls. Why lead? Because even a little bit of lead is toxic to your development. Why lead? Because even Superman can't see through it. And then what happens is someone opens up the lid and out pours rage. This is what happens to our kids. Our kids smoke marijuana to lessen the intensity of those feelings. They get drunk so they can control when the rage comes out. The better way, which again, Reaching Teens will train you how to do, but I'd love you to do for yourself, is to build a Tupperware box where you understand what is inside of you, but you choose to name the feelings, to go through emotional intelligence rather than letting them be random. You know what is inside. You know what are those experiences that are stressing you out. You open the lid of this Tupperware box, which is where things are safely contained. You take one item and you remove it safely using some tool that says, I blanked it out. I cried it out, I laughed it out, I talked it out, I prayed it out, I sculpted it out. Something that you then close the lid with less chaos inside. I want to show you now some tools. This is the Center for Parent and Teen Communication. This is 100% free for you. You can make this in your after visit summaries for your patients to go to. It is an incredibly comprehensive site. It is actually the most comprehensive site on the web. Kelsey, confirm that you can see the site right now. Okay. And this is multicultural, not just by pictures, but by content and making sure that we do not perpetuate structural inequities. In other words, we are not just doing like regular middle-class parenting that makes so many other people feel undermined, right? We do a lot to make sure that that is happening. We teach about growth and development. Each one of these subcategories will have 5 or 6 articles that range from 100 words to 2,500 words. Many of them will have films that range from 30 seconds to 10 minutes. We teach people about the importance of balanced parenting, how to discipline, how to face challenges with your child. I want to call attention to 2 things that you will use in your practices often. Supporting emotional health. You've now told a family that their child is deserving of more focused attention and to get emotional help. Preparing teens to seek professional help. This article that you can give every one of your parents for free will teach them the precise words to say to get it so that the kid will accept help in a strength-based way, right? These are, what kids need to hear so that they can, without shame or stigma, take the next steps, okay? And then, now you have a kid who is stressed, or they have somatic symptoms, or they have something where you just want them, while they're waiting for counseling or in addition to counseling or because they don't need counseling, they can build their own plan. This is the same plan that has been in my American Academy of Pediatrics books for more than a decade, but it is now interactive on the web. It is rooted in evidence. This is written by kids for kids. It will explain to them what stress is. They can spend 3 hours on this site if they want to by going to each hyperlink if they choose to. It will take them through categories that will help them first, how to problem solve. Second category is maintaining healthy bodies. The third is managing emotions. And the fourth is gaining a sense of purpose by giving back. When they are ready, they start the plan. We will walk them through 11 steps. They will put in their name and email. We are collecting no data. This is only so they will receive back their own plan that they have designed for themselves based on the evidence of what works around stress reduction, right? So we take them through 11 screens. They can do this in about 20 minutes. Why is this problem temporary? I won't be worried about it for a month now. It won't last forever. This too shall pass. And then they write also for this. All of this will appear on their own personalized page. So I'm not going to walk you through more. Just trust me. It's 11 steps. It is comprehensive. You can add it and it'll take you 1 minute to tell people how to find this. or you can put it on your after visit summaries and just say, we discussed stress today, consider building your own plan. Next. So I just want to, because I want to save time, I'm not going to talk about boundaries because it's so well covered in Reaching Teens. I want to acknowledge that listening to me, especially in an hour and a half, it's like drinking water from a fire hose. And I know, I'm a pediatrician. I get how many things you're supposed to be doing, right? I get how many things you need to do in a well visit. And along comes me telling you that you should love the children too and incorporate strength-based counseling. And you're like, how can I add anything to my plate? And my answer is, this is the plate. I'm not adding anything to your plate. There's no counseling that you're going to offer that if you focus on the risk and you focus on all that is wrong in a child, that is going to move the child in a positive direction. It's your positive regard, your genuine caring, which you have earned through your practice, that serves as the plate for the kids. I want to show you very quickly Reaching Teens, if my cursor comes back. Whoop. So my cursor, I'm going to go instead to, hopefully it'll come up here. Oh, there it is. So Reaching Teens is an American Academy of Pediatric toolkit. But can you see it, Kelsey? Okay. But it is a book that is written by many, many different disciplines, including pediatricians and adolescent medicine specialists. It is about 700 pages, right? I know that's way too big for you. I also know that in the first edition, we designed it mostly for healthcare providers. The truth is, about 3 of them used it. I'm just kidding. I'm sure some of you did. But the point is that it really went gangbusters in the youth development world. The second edition has been out for about a month. You have vouchers to make it less expensive for you to buy it. It's going to be lower than membership prices. But let me show you what this is. The internet has a full comprehensive everything, not everything's in the book, everything's on the internet. You can choose to go through all the content of the book if you want to. You can use it as a 24-hour-a-day resource. So there's going to be a chapter on working with trans kids, working with gay kids, working with suppressed kids, working with somatization, referring kids for help, giving kids bad news. It's all there. You can also choose to have your practice build skills, right? So we have 16 different skills that we've elucidated, like how to maintain your cool amidst chaos. And now if you choose that, we have told you which chapters to go to directly so that nobody is reading 1,000 pages. No one is watching 400 films. You are choosing your own journey. And what we have done now is we have created portals so that there are now Reaching Teens now has 7 different portals of entry where you can enter it from an educational setting, because this is for communities. There are communities across the country that are working collaboratively to make the entire community become strength-based, trauma-sensitive, and to know about positive youth development. Foster care, healthcare, juvenile justice, settings that serve youth enduring homelessness, substance use programs, sports and physical recreation. So let's imagine now you're coming in through healthcare. We have done your work so that you can move quickly through it and access any part of it that you want. All right. So we give you an introduction, and now we divide you into 3 groups. Are you a professional who serves adolescents clinically? Are you a health educator or public health professional? Or are you a professional who serves adolescents clinically, but interface with them for an extended periods? So for example, this one, you're a regular doctor or a regular nurse. This one, you might work in a mental health facility, or you might be a floor-based nurse where you're going to have complicated kids there for a week or 2 weeks. And then depending on which one you click, you're going to have a different experience. So let's begin with the professionals who serve adolescents clinically. We have the core chapters that are going to help you transform to a strength-based practice. We're going to help you Build a practice that meets the needs of adolescents. We're going to teach you the teen brain, about sexuality. We're going to cover boundaries, right? Then we're going to also offer you the chapters that are going to build a practice that meets tier 2 chapters, right? Reframing adolescence, body language. We're going to teach you, somewhere I missed this as well, but we're going to teach you about setting the stage with kids so that they'll know how to, oh, I remember what this is. That was the core chapters to support transforming. So this is creating adolescent-friendly spaces and services, setting the stage, the shade screen. You're just going to begin there. You're going to counsel by knowing how to focus and build on existing strengths, knowing motivational interviewing, helping adolescents own their solutions. You get your practice just to do these 7 chapters, you will transform your practice into a strength-based practice. And finally, I'm just going to show you one chapter to show what it looks like, to show what is in each chapter, because it's not, so this is the chapter on racism, which is absolutely has been seen already by hundreds of thousands of people because we've made it open access. But at the end of every chapter, we have group learning and discussion for you to talk about as a practice, live links to references, live links to resources, and CEUs. This Reaching Teens gives up to 95 CMEs for all healthcare providers or counselors or social workers. I'm done. I'm really proud of it, all right, because we spent years producing it. So with that, we've got about 10 minutes left, and I'd love to take questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ginsburg. We're really lucky to have you here. So this is your chance to ask Dr. Ginsburg a question. If you raise your hand with a little icon, you actually pop up to the top so I can see you better. Okay, so I see Rachel has the other Rachel. There's 2 Rachels here today. Rachel Slavkin has a question. So you can just, oh, you are unmuted, so you should be able to just go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ginsburg. My question is, I have tried to use that stress management plan on the website, and I wanted to use it with clients that I work with. So I did it myself first as a test run, and at the end, nothing gets emailed. So it's a blank document and no.
It's been fixed. It was a glitch. That was a temporary glitch that lasted about 6 weeks, including when Orlando came on board. It made me want to pull my hair out, but it's been fixed. That was a computer error, not a computer, some fancy talk, but it's been fixed. Thank you for trying it.
Wonderful,
Okay.
thank you.
And I'm glad you're using it, Rachel. That's great.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel.
Next question. You can type it in the chat box or raise your hand. While people are thinking about it, I would love to hear more about the shade screen that you mentioned. Now that we have access to the Reaching Teens toolkit, I'm sure I can check that out, but maybe other people might want to know how would that difference, or the shade screen, how does that differentiate from the actual ACEs screening?
Well, it's 2 completely different things, right? The ACEs screening is kind of seeing what it is that you've been exposed to, in terms of trauma. The shade screen is a verbal communication screen that reminds you to, so most people who are pediatricians on this call, and I know there's people who are not pediatricians, learned HEADS, because HEADS was there for a couple of decades. Shades is a strength-based screen where you start with what's good and right about you. From there, you move into tell me about your school. From there, tell me about your home. Tell me about the activities you like to do. Tell me about drugs and other substances, emotions, sexuality, and safety. So it teaches you which questions to ask in each category and to go fluidly. But most importantly, it is rooted in all that is good and right in kids. But the one way in which it can go wrong is I like people to understand that you don't start by congratulating them once you've heard what's good and right. You're holding the information to use at the end to leverage that. If, for example, someone says, I want to be a pediatrician when I grow up, like, so Kelsey, say that to me. So Kelsey, tell me what's right about you. And then now you tell me you want to be a pediatrician, right?
I want to be a pediatrician.
Yeah, are you compassionate and caring?
Yeah.
Wow, I'm so proud of you. That's really, really good. So Kelsey, are you using drugs?
All the time.
Exactly, right? So once you like really congratulate someone for their strengths, then you've shut down the rest of the history. So you have to learn to just absorb it so that you can leverage their strengths later.
That makes sense. Well, I'm looking forward to checking that out. Any other questions? This is your chance to ask. Don't hold back. We have 5 minutes. If you want to raise your hand with the hand icon. Oh, I see. Is it Tissy?
Peace.
Tease.
Yes. Hi, I was just curious, are there trainings based on this work right now currently offered, or is it just right now like the book and like reading?
Well, believe it or not, so thank you, Tees. Believe it or not, you're receiving a training now, right? And what I had already done earlier in the community was give, what was it, a 4-hour virtual training that we did because we had to cancel the live training. I don't know why. And so these trainings exist, but Tees, the book itself, in the first version, it kind of was out there and people needed to figure it out. And to be honest with you, I went to community. All the stuff that I learned from communities about how to make it work is now in the book. So for example, that web page, including like how to navigate it, it's all there to use it. But I am working my butt off to get it out there because it's my baby and there are other people who are getting it out there as well. But if we did a good job, it should be self-driven through the web page. Okay, thanks. Thank you, T-State.
Okay, anyone else have a question? All right, well, Rachel put a good reminder in the chat box about we are hoping to have Dr. Ginsburg come back in October or November, depending on when we can get you. And every time I go to one of your trainings, I learn so much about what we can keep integrating, keep focusing on. And I really think it's so different than what's being focused on in the general capacity. So I'm really just trying to take it in, and I hope everyone in this community is as well, that we can drive this work forward together. And that's so critical. So thank you so much for spending your time with us again today. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you to Orlando Health for sponsoring this event. It was really special to have you all here today. So thank you so much and have a great rest of your afternoon and evening. Bye, Dr. Ginsburg.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for everything you're doing. Bye-bye.